It's my honor to introduce to you today Ilana Preuss. Ilana Preuss is the founder of Recast City LLC, a consulting firm that works with local leaders, real estate developers, city and other civic leaders to integrate space for small scale producers into redevelopment projects and place-based economic development. She is so passionate about making great places, and she sees that small scale manufacturers are missing a piece in today's real estate and economic development efforts. And that includes makers. So when she says small scale, that's you guys, that's all of the maker community. With over 20 years of experience in community development, Ilana, her projects at Recast City span the country from Washington, D.C. to Honolulu, Hawaii, which is where Trey lives, or in that area. Through work with other small scale manufacturing business owners, real estate developers, foundations, city planning and economic development offices, improvement districts, as well as mayors. Her projects go from idea to action to build great places with vibrant economies that include the maker community. Ilana's forthcoming book, which is no longer forthcoming, so I have to actually change that. It's just recently released, Recast Your City, How to Save Your Downtown with Small Scale Manufacturing, was just released by Island Press a few days ago in 2021. Previously, Ilana was Vice President and Chief of Staff at Smart Growth America and worked in the US EPA's Smart Growth Division. And she currently serves on the board of directors for the national nonprofit Incremental Development Alliance. I do want to say that she will be having a book signing, a virtual book signing in Gather after this talk. But without further introduction, it is really, truly my pleasure to welcome my friend Ilana Preuss to present her keynote, Small Town, Big City, How Makers Are Building a Stronger, More Inclusive Economic Recovery.
Oh, thank you so much, Dorothy. That was the most wonderful introduction I think I have ever gotten. It is amazing to be here with all of you today. You guys are my favorites, and honestly, I don't say that to every audience. So I am really excited to be here today, and I am just super excited for everything that the Nation of Makers community is doing. And you'll see that as we talk today. And yeah, I guess let's get started. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to just tell you lots of different stories today. So as Dorothy said, my name is Ilana Preuss. And we're going to talk about, your role in all of this and why you guys are really saving the day, as long as I press the right button. So first of all, hello, Nation of Makers. I'm really excited to be here. And I know that you are all doing a ton of work in each of your communities to make a difference and to create opportunity and to educate people and to just bring this knowledge that we can make things and how important that is to our communities. And that is honestly where my soul sits. So I want to just give you a little glimpse under the hood of like who I am and what I believe in and where my passion is, so that you can get to know me a little bit as we have this conversation today. And we'll take questions at the end and all sorts of different stuff that Dorothy will be in charge of. So there are a number of things that I believe in and that I love. We won't get through all of them. We'll just get through a few of them today. Small towns. I love small towns. This is actually a town in Indiana called Orleans. They have an old car show. They sent me a picture of it because I'm working with them. I love small towns. I also love big cities. This is Baltimore. This is the RemFest, which is a Remington neighborhood festival. You can see producers and makers all up and down this street, bringing people together for this celebration. This was before COVID. So I know we will be back at these again soon. I also believe in makers and small scale manufacturing. And when I talk about small scale manufacturing, I'm talking about anybody who, from part-time to many people, 10, 20, 30, 50 people, are making a product that they can replicate or package. And obviously makers include people who are working on the focus on education, on workforce development, on all of the different parts of making as well. But this is something that has been a passion of mine for a long time. My other passion, and you have to understand this about me, is I love old industrial buildings. This is one in Baltimore, and it both makes my heart break and I want to buy it, not that I have the money to, all at the same time. We have buildings like this all over the country. Sometimes it might be an empty storefront. Sometimes it might be a big old industrial building. But we have vacant properties all over the country that to me are an opportunity. They're an opportunity to increase inclusion and equity. They're an opportunity for community growth and wealth building in our households. And I'm going to talk about that because to me, all of this ties up in one big knot and huge complex bow in my head. And I'm going to explain to you why and your role in all of that. So we're going to take a breath. I'm going to take a breath and I want to just walk us through briefly things that you probably already know about what has happened in the last year and a half of our lives and what that means in terms of the work that I do and the way I see the work that we're all doing in the Nation of Makers. So first thing to think about, right? We've had this crazy rapid adoption of technology, of where we shop and how we shop. And it was slowly growing over the years, but it sort of jumped because of the pandemic. And that has changed a lot of different pieces. We also saw not only a crash in our employment last year, but a significant drop specifically in our low wage jobs that honestly hasn't recovered in a lot of ways. And now there's all these conversations about, the businesses can't find people to hire. I was actually just did a long drive yesterday and there were, I will tell you, not a dozen billboards that were all about hiring people for large warehouse spaces, everywhere from $15 to $20 or more, because they're trying to hire people back and people want more quality, better employment. We also saw an awful crash in our business market last year. Our small businesses closed at an astronomical rate, and the impact was not even across our demographics. And so there's a lot of different research that's coming out. It's really been hard for people to track because we actually keep pretty crappy data about a lot of this stuff. But the number of Black-owned businesses, of Latino-owned businesses, of Asian-owned businesses that we lost are 2 times to many, many more times, so 4 or 5 times as much as the white-owned businesses that were closed last year. And so when we're looking at what does it mean to come out of this past year and a half, we have to think about that the impact was not even. And so the recovery and who needs support in that recovery shouldn't be even either. Because we know that the way that the money went out even last year was really lopsided. Right, we had a couple of rounds of the paycheck protection funding go out last year. The first round that went really fast. I don't know how many of you have businesses or nonprofits that you tried to get in during that first round, was skewed hugely. The second round was more proportionate in terms of who got the funding. But we know historically that our Black and brown business owners have not had the same kind of access to capital, to loans, to grants as other parts of our community have. And it's something we need to address. One of the symptoms that we can see out of all of that is this, and this is even before COVID, right? Before the pandemic, is research that shows that we have this enormous racial wealth gap that honestly is almost unchanged in the last 50 years. There are some studies that say it's 8 times. This one I cite is 6.5 times. No matter which way you look at it, it's awful. And it's not just because of historic injustices, it's because of the access to better paying jobs now. And to me, the maker movement and the maker jobs are one way to start addressing a whole bunch of these issues. So I want you to make sure that you're thinking about or sort of realizing that we are at this transformational moment right now. And I honestly believe that we have this sort of moment in time right now where there is a real population that people just want to have amnesia. And I see it happening, and honestly, it just scares me. People want to just sort of close the door on the last year and a half. They want to go back to whatever regular is to them, and they want to forget all of the jobs lost, all of the small businesses closed, all of the people who died, all of what happened this past year and a half, and just figure out what their normal is. I believe that we have this unique transformational opportunity to really jump forward in creating an inclusive economy and investing in a different way in that economy, and makers and maker businesses are a part of that. So there's a few things to just think about in this transformational moment, right? We know we need to create more good paying jobs for more people. We have that significant racial wealth gap We have a lack of good paying jobs. In most communities, there are some high paying jobs and a whole bunch of super low paying jobs. And in most communities, we have nothing left in the middle. And that's really a significant problem when we're looking at hot markets where people are being priced out of the housing. Instead of solving for all of the affordable housing money we need to find, if we help people make better wages, they can afford the community. If we think about cooler markets, we're thinking about an opportunity to pull yourself out of poverty, an opportunity for a good paying job, an opportunity to build wealth for your family and break out of the cycles that are there. We also have a huge need to support new and existing business growth. And I talk about both new and existing is because we as a country, sort of the pop culture of tech in our country, got really excited about startups. Startups is all anyone has spoken about for the last, 10 to 15 years in a lot of places, mostly tech startups, right? And the reality is that we know from an economic perspective, existing businesses, something that's been around for a few years even, is a much better bet in terms of investment because it has that staying power than something that is brand new. And it's not that we shouldn't invest in the brand new ones, but we shouldn't do it as only brand new versus existing businesses. And so we need to come up with ways to both support new businesses that aren't just tech businesses, but might be tech users, like businesses who make products, right, and use technology to get there, and existing businesses that have been around for a few years that we can help not only be stronger, but scale if that's what they're interested in doing. We also need to invest in our downtowns and main streets. And to me, these pieces tie together because it's not just that we're helping businesses and helping them grow, it's where they go, right? When we put a good business in a storefront, we get all of these other amazing benefits from having a good business in a storefront. People want to come, and I will tell you, and I'm sure you guys know this, if you have cool tools in the window, you are a magnet. You are drawing people to that window to see inside. So when we get producers and makers and artisans in those storefronts, it draws in that foot traffic. And so we need ways to invest in our downtowns and main streets and deal with a lot of the vacant commercial space that we have because of the pandemic. So the reality is that the model is completely different now, even just from 2 years ago, let alone if we look back 20, 30, 40 years. And so we have to think about how we invest in our communities, how we invest in our makers and their businesses in a very different way. There are some great opportunities around this. So I want to make sure that you recognize that there are some really great, wonderful, bright spots in all of this. So one is that we have access to training and investment and mentors and on-demand production tools through the internet that didn't exist in this way 5 years ago, right? The people who are doing trainings on-demand trainings for product businesses, the people who are doing, you can order a piece made, through an online distributed process. There are businesses after businesses I can name for you that are all in this space specifically for the maker business community. And it's unbelievable. And it sort of flattens out that access of opportunity as long as people know it's there. So something to think about. We also had this rapid adoption of technology, right? I showed you at the very beginning, the increase of e-commerce just in the last year. So that means that we had this barrier that has been crossed in a lot of cases where people maybe before weren't as comfortable using technology or accessing things online, where we had this rapid adoption in the last year and a half because of necessity, but it means that it then connects to that first point, that maybe then people are more comfortable accessing that training or the investment or the mentors through online access. We then also have this change in the way place is looked at. And I come from a city planning background. My passion is about places and all these other pieces that I showed you. But there's been this really exciting change that's happened. Honestly, it's been happening for really over the last decade, but that is really exploding in certain ways, is that local economic success is really based on the quality of the place, the uniqueness of that place, and its geographic reach. So when we look at the places where people are proud of their downtown, people have unique shops to walk to, and that end up drawing people into that community because of how cool that place is, creating that place that is unique is the thing that is expanding the geographic reach. And so it's just a very different way to think about what economic success is based on and how we create the brand of a place and not just of 200 jobs that we might have recruited that are going to stay for 10 years but then leave. So all of this comes together with the point of saying we have an opportunity right now, this transformational moment, to build a strong and inclusive economy and really get our communities back and make them our maker communities. So I want to take a quick pause. For those of you who I've never met before, and we have wonderful people, a few names have been flying past that I know. My name, as I said at the beginning, is Ilana Preuss. On the left, you can see a picture of me in this amazing electric blue dress that my mother sewed. She was a maker. She painted, she sewed, she quilted, she knit. I did not gain almost any of those other than learning how to hang blinds, which she required of me to be able to do. So that I'm a tinkerer. On the right is the opportunity I had to give a TEDx talk now a number of years ago, all about the economic power of great places. My work these days is really about how do we bring all these pieces together? How do we find maker businesses and then the ones that might be scaling to be small scale production, 20, 30, 40 people, and how do we make sure there's space for them in downtowns, in local economic development investment strategies? And one of the wonderful things I get to do pre-pandemic was to travel around the country and meet all of these different business owners and the people who really care about them and really figure out how do we bring all of these assets together that are the skills and the talents in every single one of our communities, because people make, as you guys know, people make things all over the country in every town and city, from small town to big city, people make stuff. And so how are we building that as an asset? So I just sort of frame that from the perspective of thinking about why are makers this sort of key piece to me about our local recovery. And this is really important. And it's not just because makers are automatically some of the most creative people in the room, but there's these really specific things that happened, right? And when I put this together, I started laughing as I thought about it. And part of that amnesia problem, getting me worked up, part of this amnesia problem is that makers in our community saved us during the pandemic, right? Makers are the people who turned around and figured out how to create the masks, how to create the face shields, how to create all the different kinds of PPEs that we didn't have because our supply chains fell apart. And so I think one of the things that we have to remember is that makers are key connectors in creating a supply chain that is domestic and secure, even if it means not creating the PPEs on a day-to-day basis, but having an ability to pivot on a dime like the entire maker community did last year to create the answer these needs when we need them. And so really thinking about the role of makers in creating a secure supply chain is really important for us as we're moving forward. Second thing to think about and to know is that maker businesses and small scale manufacturing have good paying jobs. They're generally, and this is pre-pandemic, so I can't tell you about what's coming out of the pandemic in terms of salaries, but they're paying 50 to 100% more than retail or service jobs. And so when we're looking at how do we create more good paying jobs in our community, how do we create more opportunity for more people, these businesses and the jobs that they create are a really important part of getting there. As I said, these businesses are creating more opportunity for more people, but it's not just through employment, it's through business ownership opportunity. We have people who make things across every single demographic we have in our community. It's part of the history and the culture of so many places and so many different communities. It's an amazing way to help more people create that opportunity for themselves and their household. And lo and behold, and I mentioned this before, they fill vacant storefronts, they bring our energy to our downtown. If you can think of walking into a space, and I actually walked into one randomly today, where you have things that you can buy in the retail space and somebody is making products in the back of that same space, right? That's retail and production, but that's also what everybody before the pandemic was calling experiential retail. You walk into a space and you're experiencing something. You can see something being made and it's a draw and it's an enormous asset, especially in the places where retail isn't working right now. We have retail vacancies all over the place and the national chains aren't interested. And so these businesses that are maker businesses that are doing production and retail, or a whole bunch of micro spaces for a bunch of different makers to sell products or to educate people, in a shared space are all part of the solution. So if Mixer, if you're on this, I stole this off of your Facebook page. The answer to me is about purposeful recovery. We're going to purposefully recover by building a new table. Because people always talk about how it's about who's at the table. And the answer is that's true. It is all about who's at the table. But I think as makers, we can honestly say we can build a new table and we can make a difference with our new table. So what do we do? I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do. And I promise there will be time to take questions. So first of all, we need to, in any of these cases, we need to pick specific outcomes and think about who should benefit from the investment. When I tell you that at a local government level, the decision makers rarely have the conversation, outcomes are generally discussed, but who should benefit from an investment? And let's be specific about it. Do we want to make sure that this investment benefits Black and brown business owners that maybe were just disproportionately impacted by the pandemic? Having those conversations is really important. We also need to extend our outreach and build new connections with maker business owners across our demographic diversity. And that's the purposefulness that I'm talking about. We need to purposefully build new connections, sit down over coffee, have those one-on-one conversations. This is the time to do it. And it will be an amazing asset for that new table we are building. And then out of all of that, we can invest in short-term actions that fill the gaps for our makers, for our new businesses, for our growing existing businesses, and for using some of those storefront spaces. All of that comes together in a new path forward. And this is really, I believe, sort of wholeheartedly, that we need to invest in people who live there in our community. We need to invest in the place, those key places in our community where people come together with those people. And then we need new structures to support all of this, right? And the maker community has built a lot of structure around the maker movement, but then how do we translate this into our economic recovery? And we think long-term, but act now. What can we do right now in the next 3 to 12 months that's going to make a big difference, because we know a lot of people just can't wait. So you guys know this. I'm going to go through this really quickly, but I just want to be clear about who I'm talking about and what I'm talking about and how you guys are really a part of this bigger, not puzzle, but this bigger pie that I talk about all over the country. There are amazing assets to our maker community, our maker businesses, our small scale manufacturing. Like I said, these businesses give us a reason to gather. We're hungry to come back and be among people again, and we'll have an opportunity to do that again very soon. But being able to go up to a vendor, see something being made in your community, buy it from somebody you might even know in your community, it's an amazing reason for people to gather. Like I said before, these businesses also help us build a more inclusive business community because people are making things across our entire demographic. So the only barrier is the outreach. We have to get out of our offices or our desks or wherever you sit at a 3D printer and go out and find people and bring them back and sit down with them in their space and ask them about what they need and what works for them. Like I said, these businesses also fill storefronts. This is a wonderful soap maker. If you want to, I don't know if she's still there. She was in Honolulu when I did have to do that project out there. Off to the side, she has this huge cauldron so she can make her soaps, pour it into the mold, and work in her space all at the same time. It's an incredibly efficient model for her business. It's also wonderful for the building owner because she is dynamic, right? She is the spirit experience. You can come in and see somebody making things. And then especially with all these vacant properties, when we can fill them in with a producer, this is a coffee shop with coffee roasting in the back that goes out for both packaged on site, but also wholesale distributed out the back door, it increases our property values. When we have vacant properties, they can decrease property values by 20%. And so as we can fill in spaces, we can raise all of the property values in that area. And then lo and behold, as we take care of our makers, we take care of our small scale manufacturers, they spread the word and we attract more people into the community who want to be entrepreneurs and makers and producers in the community. So the kinds of spaces I'm talking about, you guys know all about maker spaces. I am not going to share that one. But this includes our shared commercial kitchens, right? Anybody who's working in a commercial shared kitchen that's going to package a food product that they can sell and replicate or wholesale it, that's a small scale manufacturing. It's not only for consumption like a restaurant or caterer. And anybody who can replicate like this means that they can scale and not just sell within the community, but they can sell online, regionally or nationally, and they're bringing revenues into the community, which is an important part of a piece to remember about our maker businesses and our small scale manufacturers. So then we have the single person business. They might be part-time, aspiring to be full-time. They might be part-time and bringing in a second or a third or a fourth revenue into their household, or they might have one or two employees. These businesses are, to me, gold in our community and deserve a lot more support and investment. And then we have businesses that are scaling, and from prototyping to small batch production. These are all the small businesses in our maker community. And then we have the ones that get big, the breweries, the distilleries, or folks that really become the unicorn, like some of the clothing lines that have been able to scale very rapidly. So maybe they're doing their design on site, but the production at scale is somewhere else. All of these businesses are part of our ecosystem of the maker community and its impact on the local economy. So I just want to think about, what does this all look like on the ground, right? This is a mission-driven production space. So Columbia, Missouri recognized through our work together that having a commercial shared kitchen was going to be an important step for particularly Black and brown business owners in the community who were growing out of their home, out of their kitchen, and wanted to be able to scale. And they even managed to open it during the pandemic. It also is a program like in Baltimore, this accelerator program that's going on right now that's specifically helping, again, home-based businesses scale into retail spaces. And these home-based businesses that have people who want to scale are just so important to our local economy because they're literally building opportunity for people where people may not have that opportunity in the past. And then we have folks like South Bend that are investing in scale-up programs. They identified existing product businesses and match them with a training from a company out of Chicago, actually called 37 Oaks, that does a training for product businesses. And the decision was to focus on existing product businesses and to help them scale, because that would be the best bet in terms of helping grow jobs, grow businesses, and secure businesses into the community. So Dorothy did mention the book. I came out live on all the platforms 2 days ago. It's been a bit of a whirlwind. If you guys would like access to chapter 1 for free, you can go to recastyourcity.com. It's just super fun to be able to see. People have been showing up with this book in their maker space, in the kitchens, in all these different kinds of places in their community. So if you get the paperback instead of the Kindle and you want to send me a picture of you with it in any of your maker community things, I would love to see it. But the thing to really think about is what does this mean that we do in our community, right? And so this is about, I think there's 5 things in here to just think about taking home, right? How do we work with our community to invest in that supply chain security? Is that a baseline grant that goes to a maker space? Is that a partnership with folks about some ongoing production needs to allow that small manufacturer to maintain its space? But investing in that supply chain security becomes essential. We also need to invest in training for our startups and our scale-ups. It's essential to help people not only figure out how to get started, but how are they becoming more resilient businesses, growing businesses. If we think about makers and businesses and small scale manufacturing, it's this pyramid, right? We have tons of people making things at a small scale. We have a few that are going to get to 5 or 10 employees. We have even fewer who are going to get to 20. And then we also have a few unicorns. It's no different from the tech sector. We just never talk about it that way. And so how can we start building this pipeline of trainings that help our businesses go through that process? And then similarly, we need a pipeline of spaces that help businesses go from being at a pop-up market like this and a low-risk environment where you can be a vendor and event to having a micro retail space that might be, kid you not, in Ithaca, they start at 136 square feet, or in DC, there's a space that starts at 350 square feet. These micro spaces for businesses are so important because they're also, again, a low-risk way for a business to start in a space and not have to take on the risk of 2,000 square feet or something like that. And then we need to think about how we're dedicating capital to business growth. It's not just about training and space, it's about capital too. So WAKIF is a CDFI nonprofit investment entity in the DC area. They provide small and micro business loans for these 3 topics and a couple of others as well. There's also other CDFIs across the country. There's funding that came out from the federal government in revolving loan funds. There's tons of different ways to get funding, but we have to be purposeful about it. We have to create the programs if we don't have it, or if we have it and it's not reaching our target population, we have to do the outreach and make the connection. Sometimes it's that kind of nitty-gritty work that makes the difference. And then we have to work with our anchors and our institutions to work on local procurement. And this actually loops back to that supply chain question at the first part, is if our local anchors can be procuring their products, hard to say, from our local small manufacturers and our makers and our maker spaces under contract, then when we need those entities to be an emergency response for PPE or something else, then they're around. And so building up those connections and the personal relationships that we need are worthy of our time and our effort. So just as the reminder, if you want the book, it's super fun to have it out. I will tell you, I don't think I've ever done anything as scary as this. This book has been a labor of love, and I hope it helps all of you. It's a DIY, truly a maker's book, super accessible, not wonky, how to make it happen in your community, and also arms you with some of the language to make the case for this in your community as well. So if you want to connect up afterwards, please, you can come find me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I will be at my booth after this session, and come chat with me. I'd be happy to meet as many of you as I can. This is awesome. So just as a last note, thinking about why we're here, like, why do I do this? Why is this? It's because it's all about people, right? And I know that you guys know this because Maker Community is all about the people. For me, it's about how do we bring people together? How are we creating the places where people just want to be together in our community, but also places where people can be proud of the businesses they are creating and the jobs that they are providing to people in their community that are good paying jobs, that are in our storefronts, and that are a part of our community, and the leadership that we need, elected and volunteer and business leadership that we all need to make these things happen in our community. So to me, it is all about making great places that people are proud to call home. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen. Okay, Dorothy.
Join me in giving Ilana a round of applause. Yay. Okay, so we have a few questions here, and I'm going to start with, so Kevin wrote something that's not a question, but I'm going to turn it into a question because I actually have this question. So he said there's no new funding for new businesses, new business blood to replace the closed businesses. Businesses not in existence before COVID are ineligible for any sort of assistance still. And this is something that I noticed too, is that it was a tricky catch-22 because there was, you know, a lot of excitement about being resilient and resistant post-COVID and creating these new businesses, yet all of the mechanisms that the government put in place to rescue small business were not available to those that created new businesses. So my question is, if you are a business, if you're a maker business that started during COVID or in response to COVID, you know, is there anything out there for you? And I guess in tandem, you know, are there things that we can do, you know, to talk to leaders to maybe, you know, and have you been doing any work talking to leaders and saying like, hey, it's sort of this weird catch-22 because you're encouraging people to do this stuff. And a lot of people that lost their jobs are now looking for these new ways to make money. And they're even more, you know, they'll be more resilient, they'll respond to your economy and help it. But yet there's this weirdness right now because the money that's available right now has this weird, you know, linkage.
Yeah. Federal money is no good for that, right? Like that is, there is no question.
No, we're just not going to worry about it. Okay.
I can answer that one as easily. But the reality is that there are some places that are creating micro grant programs, or there are CDFIs, which are CDFIs, Community Certified Financial Development Institutions. I'm not going to get that acronym right, but CDFI is something worth looking up, that do microloans. And so I would look more at the community level. And if you don't have that kind of resource in your community, look in your region, because a lot of times those resources are supposed to be serving a region. They just don't know people in enough places. And then there's also mutual aid societies that have popped up all over the country in response to the pandemic, where people put in small dollar amounts to be able to help each other out. We can create mutual aid operations for small businesses as well. I will tell you, I did some work in Santa Monica, California, and we had a wonderful opportunity to interview a whole bunch of business owners from the LA region who had started or pivoted and changed their product, during the pandemic, or they lost the full-time job and it made them go full-time into their maker business. There's a wonderful organization. I don't even know if it's an organization or a network that popped up in LA called Black Owned in LA. Tons of maker businesses in there. And everyone is scrappy because they need to. But what we've seen in a lot of the places with the micro grants is that $500 of a micro grant, or even a micro loan that can be forgivable, can be an enormous support for folks to just get that first set of supplies to start selling their products. So there isn't a great answer for it, unfortunately. But there are models out there for micro grant programs and micro loan programs that are worth looking at.
And I mean, it seems like this is actually, I mean, as we think about the policy work, and I know you've done a lot of advocacy work, this could be something for us to advocate for, right? Like specifically and concretely, which is just to say, like, we need to create mechanisms, whether it's at, the city level, sort of the local regional level, state level, or even talking to our federal friends and saying like, hey, it's great that you're doing this, but, is there any mechanism that could be available? And I understand the safeguards. Part of it is safeguards, right? To make sure that businesses aren't being created just as a way to get new money, right? But I think there is this interesting loophole to think about. Okay, so I have a couple more questions. Questions are coming in, yay. All right, so someone asked, when pitching to local government or local banks on getting support for a downtown storefront business, if they say retail is dead, e-commerce is where it's at, what evidence would you present to them to argue that small business is the perfect fit and makes economic sense? So I don't know if you have a cheat sheet.
Read the book. I'll have to say it only a couple times. And thank you, Joel, for the love on the list about my book. So places that have thriving downtowns are economically more successful than places that have no downtown or have a dead downtown. And so the problem is that our economic development education of the past 50 years did not believe that. And so most of our, no offense to anybody who might be on here in economic development, it's a space I live in, but most people's economic development authorities, the folks at the regional level, or even at the local government level, they only think about big business recruitment, big game hunting. They're going to find it, and the cavalry is going to come save the day and bring 200 jobs. The reality is of those 200 jobs, 70% of them they're going to bring with them. 30% are going to go to people who are already employed in the community. The impacts are so minor, and that business was probably going to come anyway. So that's in the book too. But it is important to find the people who want to champion downtown. And the method that I always talk about is finding the small scale manufacturers and talking to business owners in downtown. And going back to Dorothy, what you said is we have to actually build an advocacy base for this. If you have an old downtown, even if it's 2 blocks long and you're in a small town, or you have a neighborhood, Main Street, right, that's been neglected for decades, and you're part of a big city, and it's been, you're surrounded by boarded up houses, or all of the old, even a sort of an old strip center might be what the neighborhood center is. There's an amazing opportunity for product businesses to go into those spaces. And so sometimes it's this conversation of like, what do we have to lose? And the biggest hurdle sometimes is that property owners don't see the value in investing in their space. And so then we have some communities that have created matching grant programs. Like some communities do facade grants. So if the business property owner is going to invest in the front of the building, the community will match it. Some communities have it also for an interior build out. But some folks and some really big cities have done this, is just asking those property owners to let them do pop-up shops in those storefronts so that they can show that there's energy and start. And then the other way to do it is to start doing programming in the middle of downtown. So the crazy super secret thing that big real estate developers do is they do like a little bit of development, and then they program that space like crazy before they ever do any major investment. And so what they've done is they've created a brand and a destination in that place that people want to be a part of. And it totally changes the way people perceive a place. And so thinking about how do you get control of Main Street? How do you get control of the neighborhood, sidewalk to be able to put out a First Friday set of music and vendors, bring the small scale manufacturers and the maker community out literally outside so that everybody can see them, can completely change the way people perceive it.
Okay, I love those ideas. I do want to put a plug in. If people want to go into the notes, and as she's answering these questions, type the answers. That would be helpful because I'm trying to type at the same time that I'm listening and also posing the questions. So if folks could help, that would be great. So to our next couple of questions, so I might be missing stuff is what I'm saying. So if folks want to do that, that'd be great. I'm going to put the next two together because I know we're running short on time here. And I do want to give our next folks an opportunity to prepare for their sessions. I think that there's a couple questions in there about, when you talk to government, like, is there an order of operations, like who's the right person to sort of start with locally, or do you just talk to everybody? And then, how do you attract attention? I know you sort of gave some of those ideas, which is like, hey, I'm just going to do a pop-up in the middle of downtown and then, in front of City Hall, and then, hey, the mayor happened to walk by and see what we're doing. But are there other ways, and are there other people, like, are there key titles within government that one should approach?
So a lot of communities have a small business person, not necessarily a department head, but somebody on staff, either in the city or the county or in the region, who is responsible for supporting small business. A lot of places don't. I often look at city council or county council members that might represent the area of the community geographically that you want to help. There is an economic development director in most communities. Sometimes it's a community and economic development director, and that's often very good because they're thinking about space too. And then a mayor or a county executive. The other way to go about doing it is the flip, is finding the business owners and starting to do things with the business owners, like other maker businesses, and doing that kind of sort of rogue, we want to be vendors in this space, holiday market, and just sort of shine the glow of success on those elected officials first, and then come to them to say, this is what we want to do. And that's much more of the grassroots opportunity. I always think about it from the perspective of, sorry for the sounds, I always think about it from the perspective of who do I need to talk to at the beginning so they'll support our implementation at the end. And it is all politics, right? Who gets the funding is incredibly political. And I will talk about an unnamed community where I've worked with them for a long time and they've invested money and their political leadership has changed their mind, it looks like, right? And they're going in a different direction. And the answer to that to me is more local advocacy and organizing. And so, but the thing I found that's fascinating is that there are a lot of people who are closet makers. And so if you go to them and talk about how it's about making things and the pride of this, and just the opportunity to bring so much hope to the community, people respond to that. So I would not expect an antagonistic reaction. I think people might minimize the potential impact, but they're generally receptive to it.
Awesome. So I have one last question. I know I'm a little over and my person hasn't told me yet, but that's okay. But I see I am over, so I'm sorry. We're just gonna ask this really quickly because I think it's a good one. So Jen Fox from Microsoft, who's amazing, asked, we've been talking a lot about sharing resources. And so her question really is around what's the best way for small business owners to find resources and knowledge, and even better than that, because I think we know that Small Business Administration has some and there's some all over the place, but what's the best way, I guess, to curate maker business resources? And is there something that Nation of Makers can do, perhaps with Microsoft, to try to, I don't know, I'm just putting it out there into the ether, that we could do to collate resources better for our maker businesses? Is there something that we can do, or is there an easy way to do that? Or is that something you want to talk about later on with us?
I'd be happy to talk with you about it later on. Tell me, Dorothy, I'm there.
Okay.
So there's local resources. So in every region, there is something called the Small Business Development Center. SBDC is the acronym that gets thrown around, Small Business Development Center. In theory, they are there to help people make a business plan, find supply chains, figure out how to launch your business. In a lot of communities, there's also something called SCORE, which is volunteers who are in the professional world of various kinds in the past, usually management level, who volunteer their time to mentor small businesses. There may not be somebody useful in either of those places in your community. They also may know nothing about product businesses, but they're generally an okay place to start. Reality is in most communities, there are some kinds of resources somewhere in the region, but the local government has no idea how to connect you up with them. And that's part of what we do in every community we work with is like, let's just map it out. Let's figure out what might be there and what might be working. There are also tons of startup programs that might be tech focused, but could be pivoted to being non-tech. There are, curriculum out there like Co-Starters or E4All that are available specifically for non-tech startups also. And then there's existing training like 37 Oaks University that I was talking about before that are specific to product businesses and have curriculum and programs like that. So there are different kinds of things out there. Some of it's going to work on a national basis. A lot of it's going to be local, or here's the kinds of things you're going to look for. In theory, your Chamber of Commerce has resources too, but a lot of chambers of commerce aren't really interested in giving small businesses the time of day. So, it comes back to that advocacy sort of push and pull question. I think a lot of times, if you can get a bunch of small business owners together, we know that actually the personal connection across business owners, not just maker business owners, the personal connection across business owners actually helps those businesses be more resilient. And so if you can get together, you can also figure out, what is the thing we want? Because there are speakers on everything under the sun across the country. So there's a lot out there, but I do think it's a lot of work to track it down sometimes. And I always hate it when the small business owners have to track it down themselves because they're running their business. So that's not a great answer though.
No, I mean, it is. And some people are putting other resources in the chat, including we have an amazing group of maker librarians and folks
Yes.
and so Sarah Nagel, who runs our libraries working group, reminded us that your local public library often has a business librarian that can connect you to community resources, and they're very specific to your community and they're already connected. So I think that's a really great resource. And I know as I visited different libraries, a lot of times that person, like in New Haven, Connecticut, that person actually is inside of the makerspace within the library. So it's easy, super easy to connect with the person. So that's really, really awesome. All right, well, Ilana, thank you so much. Our time is growing short, unfortunately. So we have to move on to our next series of sessions. And we have lots and lots of really awesome sessions coming up for today at NOMCON. I hope everyone enjoys their NOMCON, but please, join me in saying thank you so much to Ilana. You can use your virtual applause or your hands if you're off of your cameras on, or you can use your reaction buttons. But thank you so much, Ilana, for your time today and joining us as our second keynote at NOMCON.